Hello, Avila Advantage students. We are now in week 4, so we're already approaching the halfway point of the class. So keep plugging away. I know this week you'll have the quiz, the homework problems, your midterm exam, and then I think you'll find a fun forum discussion. This week we're going to look at inflation. With the forum discussion this week, I put out there where I want you to kind of read an article about the current inflation rate. It was just released on Friday. So they said that that core inflation is actually rising. So that can be a good and bad thing. In one of the forum post discussion, I want you to do a little bit of critical thinking why that might be a good thing or a bad thing. There's potential talk of raising interest rates. So generally, if there is some inflation, that shows that it's a little bit stronger economy, and that promotes growth and jobs. But at the same time, inflation does have eroding purchasing power impacts. So if we have the same wages and prices go up, that can make things worse off. So there are good and bads of inflation. So, and again, there's no right or wrong answer with this forum discussion, but I want you to reflect on it and think about it. And one of the fun parts of the forum discussion this week is I want you to pick something that you remember that you bought in the past and go to the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis calculator and put in that item and see what that would cost today. I posted an example out there in the forum discussion that just says, I remember working in 1985 at Wendy's. I was actually making $2.85 an hour. I wasn't as bright as a 16-year-old. Wendy's had a loophole in the state of Pennsylvania that could pay you less than minimum wage, which was $3.35. Eventually, I got the guts up to ask for the minimum wage of $3.35. And I plugged that in. It said, today that wage should be $7.37. So technically, with federal minimum wage at $7.25 today, the $7.25 rate has not really kept up with the inflation rate. But we know through labor markets and demand for labor. In fact, I was reading today about Portland raising their their minimum wage for their city up to like $14 an hour. So probably even Walmart and other places have been competing, so they're staying above the federal minimum. And some states have higher minimum wage. But anyway, pick something you remember, whether it was a gallon of milk or a car or price of gasoline, and we'll have a fun part with this one and just post your response to what the calculation was and your reflections on whether inflation, good or bad, for the U.S. economy. So when you go through CPI this week in your readings, again, the thing I want you to remember, it's a basket of goods and services that we keep fixed over a period of time. And what you're doing when you're doing your readings is you're looking at those changes in an index. We have to pick a particular base year, whether it's from 82 to 84 equaling 100, and making comparisons about how much that basket of goods and services has increased from year to year. So we look at these as percentage change when you're doing your readings in the book, and you'll see those calculations. Again, basic idea of percentage change, I like to think of it this way. If I go from 100 to 102, well, the change is 2, but I have to take that 2 divided by the 100 to look at how much the change was, and then I multiply by 100 to put it in percentage form. So there are, some concerns with inflation and how we measure it too, because there are quality differences. And does this basket truly represent, what the average American is buying? So they have to go out and they have to survey a lot of different people in different cities to get this calculation to look at what housing cost, what food cost, what entertainment cost, to get an idea. So, but obviously there are concerns with inflation and macroeconomy. Like we had really high inflation in the 70s and early 80s, and that can erode away wages. We're able to buy less. So, but the benefit right now with the low oil prices, it's kind of given us a little bit of a boost, but there are other things that are getting more expensive too. So, all right, the second part, your other chapter you're going to look at is the idea of the current account and international flows. One hot topic in the news right now is China and their currency and the renminbi. And money has been flying out of China like a school of fish. Even those living in China are trying to park their money in American dollars because it's been devalued so much. So what does that mean for the Chinese economy? Well, in order to keep their currency propped up, they have to use reserves of other currencies to go out and buy the renminbi to keep the price up. But it still continued to depreciate in value, and the American dollar is getting really strong. So China had a pretty strong growing economy, but now it's slowing down. And now because their currency is depreciating in value, that means imports are becoming more expensive. And that's a global concern because if imports are getting expensive and it's the second largest economy in the world, that may mean that it impacts other economies around the world that depend on selling goods to China. So be interested to see what happens in 2016 with that, whether the Chinese government is really going to be able to help stabilize their currency. So I think a lot of the Chinese people, after the crash in the stock market in China, are starting to lose a little faith in their leaders to be able to control the economy. So it's kind of the transition, if you will, to maybe a Western style economy and also being a communist nation. They're running into some issues, which is expected. So, but with the measurement of the current account, what we're leading to is we're trying to get to how do we find out a trade balance? Do we have a trade surplus or trade deficit? In the United States, we've had trade deficits for many years. That is, we import more goods that we export. And for right now, with our American dollar getting strong, that would lead to less exports, but we'd be able to buy more imports. So they're typically we talk about the physical goods and services, but they're also, when I make a distinction here, there are physical goods that we export and import, but we also import and export services, I should put it that way. So then we actually have a trade surplus with the services account, but it's typically the news that we hear about is those actual goods accounts. And the other part of this chapter examines the concept of trade in theory and what we call comparative advantage. And it may be, I'll give you an example, myself playing golf compared to Phil Mickelson, or I can also look at it in terms of him mowing my lawn. Well, he's probably better at golf, and he's probably better at mowing lawns than me. He has an absolute advantage in doing both of those things. But in terms of a comparative advantage, well, if Phil Mickelson spent all his time mowing lawns, he's sacrificing a tremendous amount of money. So in engaging in trades, maybe a country, Germany, can produce cars better, and they can produce, let's just say, wheat better. But in engaging in trade between two nations, say if we were doing it in the United States and Germany or United States and Japan, you can't have a comparative advantage in both of the products. And that's why nations engage in trade. We would not be able to enjoy the amount of goods and services that we have today without trade. Most economists are not in favor of tariffs or quotas, even though maybe some parties maybe get hurt. The idea in theory is that the nation that can produce in the lower opportunity cost should do so. But that's a summary of what you're going to read about this week. And do email me if you have questions about any of the homework problems or concepts. But otherwise, I look forward to talking to everybody online. And you guys have a great week. Take care.